guys, if you have questions, don't be afraid to stop me. Ask questions as we go. We'll take a break at some point. This won't be a super long project. We probably won't flesh out the entirety of it. And what I mean by that is it's going to be kind of a table view app where we're going to add, and then we might not get around to actually building out the detail view, but you guys will get conceptually how to do that if we end up having time or if you want to work on it afterwards. So what we're going to do first is I would like you all to open a new Xcode project. Go ahead and share my screen here. I'm going to get one built here, maybe. And like I said, if you want to have some place to commit these to, that's a great idea. I want you guys to get credit for the code that you're doing. That's important to me for sure. I'm going to call this, here, let me drag this in so you guys can see. Okay. I'm going to call this project Cookbook because we are going to do kind of like a recipes app. You might actually have done something like this before. That's totally fine. I think it'll just be good practice to work inside core data with it. Magnet this. So yeah, I'm going to call this Cookbook.
Mitch, when I was watching all the tutorials, they tell you not to add the use core data, and I haven't been using that in mine. Can you elaborate on that since why you have?
We're going to do it tonight because the tutorials want you to like custom make the file. And if you guys haven't made the file before, like that can be confusing of where it comes from. It's up to you guys. We can make it from scratch, or we can use the system to kind of do it for us.
If I use the project, is there a way to go back and click use core data?
No, let's just do it bare bones for now, and then I'll show you guys how to go about doing it. So let's go ahead and not use core data this time. Normally, I would prime this.
What is that doing exactly? It's basically building it for you, or is it implementing libraries or something?
It basically takes the name of your project and then makes the model file out of it, and you don't have to go and make the file. So there's not a whole lot that goes on to it. So we're not gonna check it for now. We'll just hit next, and then I'm gonna put it in the repo that I had cloned. But if you guys want to put that just wherever you had it, that's totally fine. So that's my repo that I've cloned. I'll throw that in there. And basically the idea of this app is, just like we've always been doing, we're gonna have a table view. We're gonna be able to hit a plus button at the top right, segue into a different view, add things like a recipe title. We'll add like the cuisine type. So if it's like American food, Chinese food, whatever. And then we'll go ahead and add like a description, maybe like some instructions, I guess, directions. So that's kind of the premise of the app that we're going to be doing today. I don't know why this is being so weird. Let me get this fixed. Okay, there we go. Okay, you guys good so far? Okay, awesome. Let's go ahead and delete this main view controller file. I don't want that. I don't think we need it. Move that guy to the trash. And then the main storyboard, we'll go ahead and delete that view controller as well. All right. Okay, so the first thing let's do is let's just drag out a table view controller. I might just fly through this a little bit because I know that you guys have done it before and we're fine with it. So I'm going to make that in a navigation controller. Make sure the nav controller is the initial view. Cool.
So and no detail, just an add for this one?
Yeah, we'll just start with an add. If we have time later, we can totally add one. I'm going to make sure we get our bar button item in there too, so that we can make that segue. Rainbow wheel. And then we'll just do add for the system item. So yeah, first thing, I mean, you guys, if you have time tonight and you're bored, I think that going back to make the detail view controller is a good idea. That'll be some good practice. But the same sense, I mean, really up to you. You'll see a lot of the times that people will use one view controller for both the add and the cell, and then just change the state depending on if there's actually an item inside to like display it if it's detailed. I usually like, just for simplicity's sake, as I do too, just because I think it just helps me divide my code up, and I think it stays a little bit more organized that way, but definitely up to you guys. So we'll make this from the add segue. And I'm just going to call this segue add recipe. And then it'll yell at us if we don't put a reuse identifier for the prototype cell. So I'm going to do, whoops, recipe cell. Cool. All right. So we should be good here this far. This isn't like super complicated stuff. Let's go ahead and build out the actual functionality of this. So I'm going to first bring out a nav item so that we can put a title in, which at the title I'll just put create recipe. And then for the bar button item, the one that's going to save it, let's go ahead and put that in. And that will be our save button. Cool. We're going to do some auto layout here. If I go fast, let me know. But this is, I'm just going to show you guys how I like to set up UI. I usually like to start just like from the top down. So first thing, I'm going to drag out a label. And this label is going to be our title. You'll see here in a minute why I'm going to do this, but let's change the font style so it's just a little bit more thick. Maybe I'll do semi-bold. And that way it just stands out a little bit better. And then I'm going to go ahead and make a text field. And it won't matter where you put it because we're going to take these two guys. Whoops. We're going to take the title label and the text field, and we're just going to put them in a stack view. So once you've got the stack view, go ahead and constrain it. So let's do, and remember, we just need a, we just need a top constraint, and then, in other words, we need an X and a Y constraint. So the top one will serve as our Y constraint, and then the left and the right will serve as our X constraint. So we got 20 on the tops and the sides. That'll look pretty sharp. And then I'm going to put a placeholder in here that just says enter a recipe title, just so the user knows where to put it. You guys good with that so far? Cool. All right. Now, next thing, let's go ahead and drag out another label. And you guys could do the option click if you wanted to. I mean, it really wouldn't matter a whole lot. So I'm going to drag out another label. And then what we're going to do now, which I think you guys have maybe only done once before, is we're going to use a picker. So go ahead up to the objects library and type in picker. And we're not going to do a date picker. We are going to do a picker view. Picker views are a lot more custom, I would say. And then I'm just going to let the stack view kind of do its thing, but I'm going to kind of prime it so it does it well. So I'm just going to drag it so it's past the label. You can see that there's kind of like a guideline there. So we've got our label, and then we've got the picker. Same thing. I'm going to put these guys in a stack view. And you can see because I dragged it a little bit, it kind of fit nicely where that label was. If your guys doesn't look perfect, that's okay. We can fix it. The really important thing is it shows up at runtime. And then same thing for this label. Let's do, let's call it just cuisine, which I don't know if I love the way that's said, but that's fine. And then this guy too, we'll put him on semi-bold. Now, when we run this, it's not going to show all these like Bay Area cities. It's going to be blank. This is just Apple's default for a picker that just shows these cities that are around like Apple headquarters. But when we run it, it's going to be blank. And then in the actual add view controller, we're going to prime it to have certain things for us. And like picker views might seem a little bit scary for you guys at first, but like I promise they're a breeze. Like I hadn't practiced them ever before and then just learned in like 15 minutes. So I was like, oh, this isn't hard. So, all right. Now that I've got these two stack views, well, I guess I have this top stack view, but it's not actually constrained yet, this cuisine one. So I'm going to go ahead and constrain this one. So select the stack view that has both your cuisine label and the picker view. And then same thing, we're going to give it an X constraint of 20 on either side. And then this one up here, I'm going to do the standard 8 space, just because I feel like that will be a better kind of default space for it. That might yell at us, but I think it's going to be okay. I changed my mind. Do Command Z. You're going to have to hit it twice so that it goes away. So go back to how it originally was with just no constraints on this particular stack view. And instead of doing the sides, actually maybe instead of doing the top, I haven't decided how I want to do this yet. Let's do 20 on the sides. And then what we'll do instead of giving it that 8 spacing is we will center it horizontally in the container. And that will look a little bit better. Oh, maybe it's not horizontal. Let me try the other one. Ooh, that looks so much worse. See, this is the fun part about auto layout. It's just like taking some time to practice. I'm gonna give it 8 on the top. I mean, the real important thing is that at runtime it actually shows. So whatever we gotta do to make that happen. If you guys can see, this cuisine is not going to actually show up. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna come in here for these hugging priorities. And I'm gonna set the priority just higher on this label. So if I just go up 1 on the constant compression resistance, now I can see the cuisine. So you guys should be able to see that there. And even if you didn't do your constraints exactly like I did, we should be all right. Is everybody good so far? Pretty solid? Okay. And then this last part, we're gonna do another label. And this label, we are gonna call it directions. We'll call that directions, and then same thing, I'm gonna come in and give it that kind of bolder font, semi-bold. Just because down below here, we're gonna have a big text view with it's gonna have all like the instructions. So we won't, we want it to look different from that. I don't wanna put these two in a stack view because I think it could get a little messy. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna constrain this directions one. I'm just gonna get an 8 space on the top, 20 space on the sides. And then that way I can kind of just pin it where it is. I think that'll look good. And then what I can do now is I can bring out a text view or a text view. And then this text view can just fill the remaining space. I mostly wanted these guys in a stack view because I wanted them to kind of be in a square just kind of parallel to each other. These ones I don't really care about lining up perfectly. I'd rather have the box filled in as much space as it can. So what I'll do here is I will just constrain 8 points from the top, and then let's do 20 on the other 3 sides. We've got to make sure we give it a bottom constraint here as well. And then that way it should fill out so that this whole bottom half of the screen can be used to type out those directions. You guys will see why we're going to do this here in a second, but I would have you clear out this lorem ipsum like this Latin text. And then let's just give it some, not placeholder text, but just like so that the user could come in and things would be a little bit more organized. I'm just going to put like cook time. And then if you hold down the option key and you press enter, you can do multiple lines. So I'm just going to do like cook times and ingredients. And that way, like the user will come in and know kind of what needs to be inside of this. And then, they can fill out more information. This isn't going to be a perfect recipe app. It's just more to give you guys some content to fill it out with. All right. Is anyone held up to this point? Are you guys pretty good here so far? Okay. What I always like to do is when I've made something in the storyboard and I'm not sure if my auto layout has worked, I will come out and launch it. And that way I can make sure that everything's showing up. And if it's not showing up, then I know, earlier on to just fix something rather than go in and start writing code. So I'm going to go ahead and launch that. And it's going to take a second. Maybe. This poor computer is just firing all cylinders right now. Okay. All right, and then we go ahead and hit this add. And now I can see I've got my title here. It looks pretty squared up. We've got the cuisine. There's obviously nothing in the picker view. Like I said, it's going to be empty. And then I can come in and write some text out here. And that way the user kind of gets an idea of what goes in this text view. So we're pretty solid there. Is everyone to this point where this add recipe looks pretty sharp? Okay, let me know if you're not. Now that that's out of the way, we can kind of go ahead and queue up the rest of what we're going to work with. Just for the sake of not forgetting later, let's go ahead and make our 2 view controller files. So we'll do a recipes table view controller. And then we'll also do a add recipe view controller. And that way we can go ahead and just we can class them, make sure they look right, and we'll be good. One thing I like to do too, whenever I make a table view controller and I've just named the prototype cell, is I will come down to where it's asking for what the reuse identifier is, and then I'll just name it right out of the get-go. Because 9 times out of 10, I'll run the app, and then it will say, cell is unreachable at reuse identifier. I wish I would have just said it earlier. All right, let's go class those 2 views. This one's our our add recipe. And then this one is our recipes table view controller. And then for this guy, I think what we're going to do is we're just going to use a basic cell today. We could probably go flesh out the model more with more stuff, but basically our model is just going to be a string here and a value that we're going to get. It's going to end up being a string from this, and then just string from our body text. So it's not going to be a whole lot. If you wanted to go in and write like date made or recipe, I don't know, we could go back and do that, but I think we'll try to keep it pretty simple today. So I'm going to go ahead and make these guys into a folder and then call that view controller, view controllers. And then the rest of my files, I like those organized too. So I'll just go ahead and make sure my storyboards are on the same file. And I'm not sure if this is something that your employers will be like keen on noticing if you do in your apps or not, but I can say that if someone went through your code and saw it was organized, that it would probably make them happier to know that you are an organized person. I have no idea what's happening right now. Okay, we're good. All right. So storyboards. And then does anyone know what to do when you put your info.plist into a folder and your app crashes because of it? Because if I run this right now, it's going to crash. I'll show you. Does anyone know why it would crash or how to resolve the issue?
Is it because it's not part of the main file?
Yeah, so now that we've put this plist inside of a folder, the project initially knew where it was, but now that we've put it inside of a folder, it's not really smart enough to know what happened to it. So what we have to do is come back into this top level, and then it's just, the identity is kind of like, what's the skeleton of the project? The info plist kind of controls the project. So kind of like the brain and allows like permissions and things. So we just have to redefine where it is, and it just lives in this folder now. So just remember to do that. I think I helped like 4 students this week who had already like done that before, and then they were like, why doesn't this work? So because you need to pick your plist file. So now our build should work and it shouldn't be a problem. Cool. All right, so we've definitely got things queued up. We can worry about making outlets here in a little bit. Actually, it's up to you guys. Do we want to start doing core data stuff? Because you'll do some core data and then you'll get a break to go back to the storyboard, or do we just want to finalize the storyboard and then focus the rest of the time on core data?
Let's hop in the core data.
You want to do the core data? Okay, let's do it. All right. So because we didn't select use core data in our project, it won't automatically come with the model file. So we need to go about first making our core data model file. So can someone walk me through how we would do that?
Make a new file, core data file, just like you would a subclass file.
Yep. So I'm not going to use a Swift file, right?
No, you're going to use a core data below.
Yep, right here. This is critical.
So if you hit, this is where my question is, when you check mark core data in a project, this is what it gives you then, is what you're saying?
Yes, this will give it to you automatically. It will name it the name of your project. So it really boils down to how you guys want to name this is kind of the important thing. I'm going to name it the same name as my project. Because you'll see why, because your entity is going to be your model. So everything that's inside this file before the period, this is just the name of the file. It's not necessarily the name of your model.
So if we have ours called something different, would it matter if we call this cookbook?
No, I mean, just as long as you remember what it's called. I mean, you don't have to remember because it's just before the period. It's just that this is critical because when you guys give your container a specific name, it has to be exactly this string, because core data is going to go and look for that persistent store, and it has to match that name or else it won't be able to find it. And that is totally something that I did in a sprint challenge, and that was the only reason why my app was not working. That was really sad, but it was an easy fix. Okay, cool. So we've got this file now, but the model isn't created. So how would I first go about doing what would be equivalent to saying like class or struct?
Add entity.
Yep. So let's go down here and add the entity. And then we've got our first entity up here. And then if I want to rename that to anything, which you should, just come up here, double click it. And then I'm going to just call this recipe. Okay.
Then add an attribute.
Sorry, what'd you say?
Oh, and then add an attribute.
Yep. So let's do 3 attributes. So I'm going to do a title. And this is going to be a string. I'm also going to do a cuisine. This is also going to be a string. You'll see later why. And then let's also do a body, just for like the text. Or do you guys want to call it, we could call it like instructions, directions. Let's call it directions, because I feel like that will make it a little bit easier on us. And then this is also going to be a string. Cool. I don't really want any of these to be optional. I want at least all 3 of these elements to be inside. If we ever wanted them to be optional, how would I go about doing this?
Go into the inspector and change it to optional right there. And that's just, that's not code optional, that's data optional.
Right. So I would say this, when we make a convenience initializer, that's where we'll indicate that it's optional. So yeah, this is a data optional property. So if like we don't get it from our persistent store, we won't be mad. But I think because the way we're going to set up the rest of this project, we will always have all 3 of these attributes because of, we're the only ones creating. You'll see tomorrow that multiple people are going to be creating. You guys are going to get a whole slew of task entries during tomorrow's project, and it'll be kind of funny. But right now, we'll be pretty good here.
So does it need a default value? That confused me during the lecture. Do we always have to give it a default value or no?
Well, if the data source is considered optional here, we don't have to give it a default value. But if it's not considered optional, this needs a default value. So I would say for the most part, you don't really need to monkey over here a whole lot. And when we do need to monkey over here, I will help you with it in your actual like individual projects. But for now, I want you guys to just kind of get some like base level reiteration of how to set these model objects up. Okay, cool. So we've got this recipe model that lives inside of our cookbook data model file, which would be good, right? Like if we wanted to go make more model objects, let's say we make one for like a chef. Like this is where we would add another entity and we would describe the chef who made it. And then it would be good to have it all within one file, right? So that's kind of the benefit of of calling this the name of your project because it kind of encapsulates everything. Okay, cool. Now, the problem is here is that every time we go to initialize a new recipe object, the way that this is set up, it doesn't care about our directions, it doesn't care about our cuisine, it doesn't care about our titles, it knows nothing about them. So we need to make an accompanying file to work with this model object. Someone help me kind of walk through how we would do that.
How we make a controller for it?
Yeah, so, well, we will make a controller here in a second. I should have phrased that a little better, but we're gonna make our convenience file. That's going to initialize our data object with everything that it will have. So what we're gonna say is we're gonna give it a recipe plus convenience file. So the reason for this is kind of like I said, our data model only cares about what it's getting out of context. It doesn't care about what properties it's getting, it just cares about the context that it's working with. So that's why we make this convenience file, because in the convenience file, we can say, oh yeah, we want you to get cuisine. Maybe we don't care about directions, we can make it optional. And then we do want a title. So this convenience file kind of helps us out here. So like we did on Monday when we first made this convenience file, how should I go about helping our recipe model to kind of get it to be at a place where we want to use it?
Well, import data first.
Yeah.
Yeah, here, I'll show you what will happen if you don't import core data, and you'll see why it's important. So pretend we put in core data, what else would we do?
Make your extension task.
Yep.
I mean, your extension cookbook or recipe, whatever you call it.
Yeah. So what's basically happening here is we're just giving recipe more things to know about. And then there's that convenience initializer that we use. So I just go down to the second one and do convenience init. And then it's going to ask for the specific parameters that you want to give it. So we had a title, which is a string. And then we had cuisine, which is a string. And then we also had body, we called it directions. Directions, which is a string. And make sure you guys spell these right, because if they're misspelled, and then we go to initialize something and it doesn't draw from the data model, it'll get messy. And then the last thing that we need is our context. Does anyone remember what type the context needs to be?
Main.
NS context object.
Yeah, this is where it's not going to delve into the actual context yet. We just need to give it the right type, which is NS managed object context. The problem is it's not going to populate because, like I said, you guys were good about it, but you got to make sure you import core data. And then if you import core data, then we'll have access to that type. So it's called NS managed object context. So that's the context that we're going to deal with. And for the most part, whenever you guys make convenience initializers, the format is going to follow exactly this. We're going to put in the properties that we included in the data model, and then our context we're going to pass in is of type NS managed object context. Which you're right, Austin, it will end up being the main context once we pass it in. Cool. And then there's kind of a funky init that we have to add into this. Do you guys remember what that is?
The self.
Self.init. And so here we are going to pass in this context. And then the rest of the properties we'll just initialize as is. We won't worry about doing an enum today, but you guys got some good practice doing them. But we won't need to worry about doing any raw values because everything's going to be a string. Whoops, I need self. Directions. Now we should be able to build this and have no problem. So the beauty of this now is that every time a recipe object is created, it's going to make sure that we have properties for all of these things. If we didn't make this convenience file, we would have to go every time that we initialize something, we would have to go and personally type in all these aspects, and there would be a lot of room for error potentially, especially if things are out of order or spelled wrong. So your convenience initializer does just exactly that. It's just a convenient thing for you. Do you guys have questions about this? Pretty good so far.
So in the projects we worked on, how come sometimes you don't have to initialize certain objects or certain items?
So there are certain things. So like, are you talking about maybe like the date that you used today?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. So you guys used the date, but it was what you just did for it. It was that you said date is of type date, which is equal to date, which captured the certain time. So this was a default value that you gave it. And this date just means, hey, this is the date at the moment the compiler hit this line of code. And so there are some properties that you'll just give default values to, and then they don't need to be put into the convenience initializer because they already have a value to draw from. But we always want to pass in stuff that is going to be case sensitive. So like every time the user comes in to create a recipe object, we would hope that every single time these are new objects, right? These are new properties, because no two recipes would probably be the same. Does that make sense, Will?
Yeah. So these items are given a property that's not part of the original data model, right?
Right. They're not going to be like, we're not going to give any of these default values. If I did want to put a date in, like I just give you some examples of things that might have default values. So like date is a great one if you want to get the current date. If you wanted to like put in a bool of like have made, so that like the user has made or has not made the recipe before, which we should have done, that would have been cool. I would default that to false. And then that way, every time I make a convenience initializer, I don't have to include a has made is false. It would already know it as part of the way that we set it up. So in general, this is kind of how you guys will go about doing this from now on. Oops, I just put that in my wrong file. So now what I kind of like to do now that I've made that is I like to make a model file. And then inside the model file, I like to kind of specify what is doing the core data work and what is just strictly working on the model. So I know that our data model file is strictly core data, but this is kind of like under the hood working on just the model of the recipe itself, kind of outside of the scope of core data. The only thing it really calls for is the object constants, which, you know, we can give it later. Okay, there is one critical piece of core data that we are missing. What do you guys think?
The core data stack.
Yep. I'm going to make that inside my core data folder. And it's just a Swift file. Whoops, I'm such an idiot. I didn't even name it. Let me delete that.
Do we always call it core data stack?
Traditionally, yeah. I mean, every time I've ever used core data, I've made this core data stack, and it has virtually been the same thing every time. There is a certain point that we'll get to that you'll kind of modify things inside of here, but for the most part, it'll be the same. So I've actually got a code snippet that I use for this, and it just has everything that I need. If you guys would like that snippet, I will go ahead and send it to you if you didn't already have it from Spencer's lecture yesterday. This is going to be an after hours channel.
What did you call your snippet, just for curiosity's sake?
I called it core data stack simple. And the reason behind being simple is it's just like kind of the bare bones what I need. Like I said, later on, you guys might add some things to your core data stack in later lessons. But I called it that just because this is all I need to get core data to work for me. Cool. You'll see sometimes people have put this save to persistent store inside their model controller. Sometimes they put it inside of this core data stack. I think going forward here, it might be a better idea to keep it inside your core data stack, because that will make sure that every time that you save to persistent store, it's going to save in the same context. And we'll see that here in just a second. All right. So the only really ever thing that you guys need to modify about this kind of simple layout is you need to make sure that you put your container name in. So do you guys remember what we needed to have this container name be called?
Cookbook.
Yes. Austin, tell me why it's cookbook.
So the data can be found.
Yes. Because it's not looking specifically for your entity here. It's looking for this whole file. So it needs to know which file everything lives in to look for in context. So basically everything before this period for your model file should be the name that you put in here for your container. So like I said, when I did the sprint that you guys are doing on Friday, I thought everything was working. I was trying to debug. It was just not figuring itself out. And all I had done is I said one word instead of a different word. It might have needed to just be plural instead of singular. So just pay attention to that. But as far as everything that we need from our core data stack, I think we're pretty queued up. This is everything that we really need. So this is a good time to make a commit. I'm just going to say configure UI and set up core data skeleton. Because we've kind of got like the bare bones of what we need for our core data to be saved and persisted. We'll just need to kind of configure the methods to do so. All right. So I like where we're at with our model there. That looks good. Now, the real problem is here is like we've given it a context where it can do things, but we haven't actually said to do things in context yet. So let's go ahead and make a model controller so that every time we want to make, update, or delete our recipe, we have kind of a hub to do that. So I'm going to make a new Swift file. And this is going to be our recipe controller. And I'm going to let that live inside of a model controller folder.
And we have to import core data on the core data stack as well.
Yes, that's right. The snippet I sent you should already have it inside. But yeah, you will need that because I'll show you. All these classes and types that we use, like NS persistent container, NS manage object context, none of these are accessible unless we import core data. It's the framework that holds the information for all of this. All right, are you guys good so far? Do we have any questions about what we've done? We're good? Okay, cool. All right, let's go ahead and make our model controller class. So this is going to be class recipe controller. Okay. And then basically today is I really only want two things to happen. I want to be able to add a new recipe, save it. I mean, like saving and adding are essentially the same thing. And then I want to just be able to delete it. So how should I go about creating these methods to create and delete here?
Make a discardable result function.
Sure.
Called create recipe.
Let's do it without discardable just so you can see again the error and then how to fix it. So I'm just going to do a regular func create recipe. And then what do I want to pass in for parameters?
Your model, basically. Everything that we have in the model.
Yeah, I can't pass like a model yet because we don't have one made.
Oh, so you want to type, I forgot what we called it, but like, yeah, title and then recipe or directions and then cuisine, yeah.
And then directions.
And we want it to return the recipe, I believe.
Yes.
Or the model.
Yep, we'll go ahead and return a model object, so the recipe. And then the reason that we didn't need to give it a context is you'll see here in a second, we are going to declare. So like right here, I'm going to say let recipe equal our model, and then that's going to be where we can include the context. So we don't need to pass it in when we create one, but when a new recipe is actually initialized with these things we're going to pass in, then we're going to want to give it a context. So basically, in short, once you've got all the puzzle pieces to make your model, then we want to put it in context. So you can think of context as kind of like the puzzle frame that you're going to be putting these pieces into. All right, cool. So what should I pass in for each of these parameters?
Just title, cuisine, directions, and then the context should be the core data, but we got to make the share.
Yeah, so we'll just do our core data stack dot shared because we made a static property inside of this. So the static property means that like everyone can use this aspect. And because it's shared, everyone has access to everything inside the core data stack class, which is going to come in handy when we're saving to persistent store. So we'll do core data stack dot shared dot main context. Perfect. So we've got all of like our little pieces to put it in context. One thing that we're missing here is that we have to call that save method, because once it's got it in context, we got to put it into that SQLite database. And luckily, you guys don't have to worry about that. Core Data Stack will do it for you. You just have to do that save to persistent store method, so that this can do the work. And it's basically just this dot save method. This can do the work of converting our model into that SQLite file. And then we'll be good to go. And then I'm missing a return here. So what should I return?
The recipe.
Yeah. We're going to return that recipe. So that's just like a good base level use case of a create function in core data. I mean, I think this would be a good, just like we've done in the last 2 days, this is going to be a good model to refer back to kind of set up your hint, hint on Friday. You're going to be creating things. This is a good way to go about it. Okay. And then I want to make a delete function. So kind of in reverse of this, how would I go about doing that?
A function delete, and then you'll pass in that task or that recipe.
Yep. So we're going to do delete recipe. We're going to pass in a recipe. So we'll, let's say that we made one up here. Now we want to delete it. We'll pass it in. And then how should I go about actually deleting that?
Open up core data stack and activate its delete.
Core data stack. And then I don't have to delete from here.
.share.main context.delete.
Main context.delete.
I think, hopefully.
Yep, you're right. So what we've done here is, so if you look up line 14, we put all the puzzle pieces together and then we put it in context. And then the context said, cool, I've got everything I need. Let's go ahead and save. So now we're just kind of doing the reverse. We're just saying, hey, go back into that main context, and then whatever object I give you, I just want you to delete it. Okay, now what's the problem here that if I went to go swipe to delete, why wouldn't this be a complete function?
Because you don't have the delete underneath it. I mean, you don't have the save to persistent store.
Exactly. We need to make sure that this kind of, and it's kind of silly to think about, but like we delete something and then we need to save that state of the context. So if we went to delete this and we didn't have line 21, the swipe to delete would probably happen and you would see maybe some stuff disappear. But if you ever came back to the table view, it would come back. It would be there again for you. So that's why we have to save to persistent store. Don't quote me on that. Either it would not show up and disappear, or it would crash your app, one of the two.
Mitch, I have a random question. Does it matter, like, I guess how we set this up, create, recipe, delete, does it matter where we put these things? Can I put, the create below the delete like we're about to do, or can I just have it either way, or is there a certain way you're supposed to go about it?
I would just suggest doing things like chronologically. So think about what things are going to come first in the app. But that said, I wouldn't worry about it a whole ton. Because this is going to be a smaller scale app, I wouldn't normally do this, but I would put a mark in here and just say methods. Because at some point, you guys are going to make a model controller or some files that are just linked, huge, huge files. But to answer your question, Austin, generally we categorize things based off of what they are. So as long as your functions are kind of in the same section, that's fine. All right, cool. So I've got our model controller configured. I'm going to make a commit. So we set up our model controller. Cool. So you guys don't need to understand perfectly what core data is doing to this point, but I just kind of want to walk you through what's happening so far. So we make this model file, which this model file is just kind of like, it's kind of like a blender in some ways, where we can give the model certain properties and then it can put it in a blender and turn it into SQLite. It can put it in that data format so that it can be stored just with less memory. And SQLite, I don't know if any of you guys are familiar with it. You will get familiar with it in computer science, but it's just a simpler data form than what we would use here. So that's kind of what's happening every time we put, this create method in. We're taking all these pieces and then we're putting them in the blender, which is our context, and then the blender spits out that SQLite data into where it can be saved onto the disk. And so that's what this save method is doing here. If I option click this save method saves it to a persistent store, or it gives it to the persistent, it gives it to the persistent store coordinator. And then that persistent store coordinator is in charge of saying, like, this is where it goes as far as SQLite is concerned. So that's kind of what we're doing here, is it's being saved. And as long as it has a place to be saved, AKA our container, we're good to go. So that's why this is very boilerplate code, because everything needs a container to live in, and it needs some way to save the state of the context.
So do we not need an update recipe?
We won't today unless we get to the point where, because like all we've configured so far, is just the add. So the update would come in handy if we were going to go to the lengths of making the detail view controller. I don't know if I'll make time for it tonight, or if I'll finish it out and just keep it in the recording for you guys. I haven't really decided yet.
So you only need to update if you're doing a detail?
Yeah, I mean, because if you're going to go back in, because like we would select a cell and then come to a new view, and then ideally from that view we would be able to edit things. That's where an update function would come in handy. So if we get to that point tonight, I will show you guys. But I think you guys had some good practice doing some updates today, if I remember right. Have you guys made an update so far in that journal project?
Yes.
Okay. That one and the task ones are like pretty similar, and I feel like those will be good practice for you. So I just don't want to overload you guys tonight and keep it short for you. Okay, cool. So we made the model controller. Let's take a brief 3 or 4 minute break, just because we've been going at it for about an hour or so. But I would like you guys to kind of think ahead of like, what's the next step? What do we need to configure next? Anyways, so yeah, step away, go get some water, go stretch. We'll be back in about 5 minutes. let everybody roll back in here. Conceptually, I kind of wanted you guys to kind of follow the same thought process in today's project that we built, right? This one right now, I don't mean like today's projects for your afternoon project, but just kind of like, I wanted you to follow the same methodical approach that you might in a sprint challenge. I know that in the sprint challenge, you guys might feel like kind of a scramble and like there are other things that I want you to set up and do, but I hope that this would be kind of your step-by-step approach is start out small with like storyboard and get it to look how you want it to, and then make sure you refine kind of your model object and make sure that looks sharp. But yeah, take it slow and incrementally, because I know that there are some students who like, they'll jump right into the table view and try to start making the fetch results controller. And I think it's better to just start with your base building blocks and work up. So, all right. So as far as what goes next, what do we need to do next? I guess we should say, what needs to be the next approach?
Alter the view controller. I started with the add recipe view controller, but you can do either or.
Okay, cool. Let's let's do that. So let's go. We haven't even set up the outlets to do kind of what we need them to. So let's go do that right away. We'll just get that done and squared away with. And this will be good. I think this is kind of new for you guys to work with the picker view. It'll be some good practice here. If my storyboard will ever load. Picker views are fun. And I think with a lot of things in iOS programming, the first time you do them is going to be hard. And then after it, you just get better and better. So I'm going to open up Assistant Editor. And I'm going to go ahead and make an outlet from these three elements. So one from our title text field. I'm going to make another one from the picker, and I'm just going to call this picker. Actually, I mean, it doesn't matter, but I'm going to call it picker view. And then one from our directions text view. All right, cool. So we've got those. Another thing I like to do to just kind of keep my code organized is I like to make a mark. Oops. I can't remember if there's supposed to be a gap there or not. Anyways, so I'm going to do a mark, and then I'm going to call this properties and outlets. And then you can actually go through, highlight this, or type it into a search bar and then find these things if you need to. But it's just a good way to keep your code clean. And then I'm going to make a separate one here for our methods. And technically I would call this like view loading method, and then we'd have a navigation, but it's fine. Okay, and then let's also go ahead and make a function from the save button so that when we actually have stuff, we can save it. Something can happen. Just for now, because I don't have any like content to file out with this here, I'm just gonna do navigation controller dot pop, and we'll make that animated true. And I don't need the assistant editor anymore, so I'm just going to go back into our detail view. I'm sorry, our add view. Okay, cool. Now let's give this a run. This is like what I want you guys to kind of really practice, and I've said this a lot of times every time we do an after hours, but just go back to your code often, run it, see if it's working for you, and just make sure that each individual part is doing its job. And then that will just save you so much more. That'll save you a lot of grief down the road.
Could you show us in the end, if you have extra time, how to put an image on your app like you did for the Water My Plants?
Oh yeah, that'd be cool. They're actually super easy to do. It's more just like being picky about the image that you want and just making it look sharp, but it's not hard to do. Okay, so I can think of two things here. Well, there's definitely one thing here that I don't love. It's just like there's no content in our picker view. So I'll show you guys how to get that going here. But our save button works. So now I'm like good and done. If that save button never works, I know that it's a code related issue. It has nothing to do with what we've written so far. It just has more to do with the logic if it doesn't work. Okay, cool. Now let's talk about picker views, because I feel like this will be something fairly new for you guys and something that maybe you haven't messed a whole ton with yet. So I'm going to take out this navigation because we're not going to be segueing from this to another view. Now, I remember one of you asking once upon a time, like, why we do extensions. I can't remember which one of you it is. But anyway, someone was like, why would we do extensions? Who said that?
I think it was me.
It was you. Okay, I'm going to show you why extensions are good. Because whenever we use a picker view, and there's a lot of UI elements that need this, they have their own delegate methods to work with. So what we're going to do down below is we're going to make an extension on our add recipe view controller. And what it's going to be is our delegate methods. So I'm going to make those extensions for UI picker view delegate.
Would it also be possible to do it in the class as well?
Yeah, that's why I want to show you the extension, because you could do it in the class, but this is going to keep it clean for you. So the beauty of the extension is it keeps everything related to your picker view just in its own organized code bubble. So and every time you guys use a picker view, we're going to need to conform to these two protocols, and I'll show you why here in a second. We're going to need these two specific protocols. So it's going to yell at us here, and it's a good yell because it's going to give us protocol stubs, which are just methods that allow for the delegate to work. So it just gave us one to start with. It probably should be two. Yeah. Okay, cool. So you guys should get a number of components and a number of rows in component. And kind of just to simplify those, components are how many sliders are within your date or your picker. So when you guys are picking like a birthday, there's a birth month, a birthday, and a birth year. That would mean that we have 3 components. So what do we want to return here if we're talking about cuisines?
String?
Right. It's just going to be a string, right? And I guess I should have probably phrased this a little bit better, but we're only really going to have one form of content to get out. Whereas like your birthday has 3 elements, our cuisine is just going to be of 1 element. It's going to be like Japanese food or Chinese food or Italian food. So we really only need 1 slider. Okay. And then this other method is the number of rows in component. So this is saying we've got 1 row. So if this was birth months, we would have 12 number of rows. Or if we had days, it would be up to 31 days. And years could technically be however many years we've been alive.
Should we make a optional variable above to declare our model and model controller?
Yes, maybe we'll do that when we hit our prepare for Segue, just because I like to kind of tackle things as they come. But you're on the right track. We will come back and do that here in a second. So what I'm going to show you guys for picker views is that we have to give it some sort of information. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say var picker data. Picker data. And this is going to be like our information that's inside the picker view. So this is going to be an array of strings. It's going to be a list. And for now, I'm going to have it be empty. It's going to start off empty, which is fine. Now, if you can see here, this is asking for us to return an integer. So the number of things, just if you think about the birthday things, is like we're going to have 12 months of the year where your birth month can be. What we're going to return here is going to be picker data dot count. So however many items that we have in this list. And you guys will see this here really quickly. So in the view did load, I'm going to start to put in some information into this picker data. So someone give me a type of food, like a type of cuisine.
Thai food.
Italian.
So Thai. So we'll just have 1 for now. Thai food will be our only one. Now, if I run this, I don't think anything's going to show up.
Don't you need update views?
We won't need an update views because this is within the view did load, so it'll show up as soon as the view finishes. That's kind of, we won't need to do an update views because of that. Just to give us some time saving. So nothing's really changed about this, but under the hood, we're saying, okay, I want one row, like one, place for people to select from. And then I want it to just be however many items are in this list. But there's two other methods that we have to implement in order to get this to work. So the first one that I'm going to have you guys do is picker view. Actually, I guess we could say this. It's just going to be the title for row. So look for title for row under the picker view methods. And if we look now, this one is returning a string. So it's saying we have one column of items that we can have. We have however many numbers of items are in our list. And then now what we're going to say is each selection will be the title of what lives inside the array. So if this is going straight over your head, that's fine. You'll see here right away like what's going to happen. So what we're going to do here is we're just going to say picker data, and just like we do with index path.row, we don't even need index path. It's just saying, hey, in this picker data, if I'm the first element in the picker data, I want the first element of the picker. So now if you guys have all three of these methods in, we can go ahead and run this. And now we should see Thai as the one option in our picker. Oh, I know why. But maybe you guys can find out for yourself why this isn't working. It might be kind of tricky to conceptualize, but does anyone know why our delegate methods are not working?
Do you need to import anything?
No, we don't need to import anything.
You haven't said yeah.
Sorry, you guys both said that at the same time. What'd you say?
Yeah, you haven't set the delegate to the view controller.
Exactly. It needs a place to kind of communicate with, because now the picker view is getting information, but it doesn't know where to get it from or where to show it to. So like the information lives inside the view. So we need to say, we need to say picker view dot, and then it has both a data source and it also has, that was really good that you guys picked that up. It also has a delegate. So we're going to set these equal to what?
Self.
Self. So the actual view controller that we're living inside. Delegates and protocols are hard, guys, but like once you get more practice with them, you will get good. You will get better and better.
Can you
now
explain? Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Will. What's up?
Could you explain, since we're talking about delegates, like what it's used for in this instance?
This is good because you guys just talked about views last week, but a lot of you noticed when you guys made your custom view that like you weren't able to go into your password text field and enter stuff, right? I think that happened to a couple of you. That's because there's layers to your app. So we added the layer of a picker view, but it's just living on top of our view. They don't actually communicate. They just live on different layers. But now if we set both the data source, AKA where it's getting information from, and B, the delegate, where it's like looking for things that change, if we set that to the view, they can talk together. So the view can talk to the picker and the information can be exchanged. Does that kind of make sense, Will? You guys will see here in a second when I run this. Now that we've set the data source to find this picker data and the delegate to respond to these methods, it'll work for us. And if you guys ever have a struggle like implementing something like a picker, just Google it and I guarantee there will be some cool blog that talks about how to do it. So now we've got our Thai. So let's go back in. Someone give me another cuisine type.
Italian food, Mexican food.
Italian, Mexican.
Japanese.
Yeah. Japanese, Chinese. I'm actually going to try this to see if it works. I'm not totally sure that it will. No, I don't think it will. I was going to see if I could actually put other characters in. I know that Swift is, ooh, it might work. Yep, Swift is compliant with other languages. So you guys could put like whatever other language you want in there too. Anyways, give me like 2 more types. Let's do American.
Greek.
Greek food. Cool. Now that we run this, the picker can use the data source to look for this picker data, which we've given it down here. And then it can also communicate with the delegate to make sure it shows however many it needs, depending on the picker data source that we've given it. Cool. So now you've got all these types. And can you guys kind of see the beauty behind this, where instead of a user being able to type whatever they want, we've given, it's almost like an enum here, we've given them direct values so that there's no confusion. They can't misspell, they can't do lowercase, so that, as you can imagine, when we come back in, we have some sections, they're all going to fall under these set sections that we've given them. Cool. Okay. If that just blew over your head, that's okay. This is like kind of a first exposure to this, and that's fine. You guys won't need to do a picker on Friday. It's just something fun to practice that I think will be good.
So the delegate that you have inside the view debug, is that delegate referencing the extension?
The delegate is referencing, I don't know why this isn't letting me. Self here indicates whatever class you're inside of.
Uh-huh.
So self is saying the picker view's data source is our add recipe view controller class, and the delegate is also the add recipe view controller class.
Okay.
So that's how you kind of can connect the UI to communicate with all this code. That's kind of the purpose of the actual, because if you think about it, like we took a view controller and we set a class to it so that this code could be written, right?
Uh-huh.
So in a similar way, we're sort of classing our picker via this delegate method. We're just saying, hey, like you can communicate with this code file. You can work with the code that's inside this file.
Mm-hmm.
So
okay,
cool. They're hard, guys. Like delegates are tough, but you guys will get really, really good at them. Cool. So we're pretty fleshed out here. Like Austin said, we're definitely going to want some sort of thing for our view or for our prepare for Segue to give us. We're only going to need a recipe controller, and I'll show you guys why in a little bit. And the only thing we'll really have to come back to is this save button. So I'm going to just do flesh out save button. That's like really the last thing that really needs to happen inside this file. The rest of our work for the rest of the night is going to be inside this table view. All right, I'm going to go through and I'm going to clean up some code. So I'm going to take out, we're going to keep number of rows and sections. Just like we did today, we kind of divvied things up. I'm going to uncomment our self or row app. And then the delete style that we care about is this second one. So this commit editing style. We're going to want to keep that. And Spencer kind of said that we really don't use this insert, and that's pretty true for me. Like I've never really had to use it at all. And then the last thing that we'll need is our segue method. So in short, the ones that I kept were, I'll go back to them here in a second. I kept our prepare for segue. I kept the commit editing style, and then I kept these data source methods. So we have number of sections, number of rows and sections, self or row at, and commit editing style. And because I know that I'm going to have some like titles, I'm just going to go ahead and throw in title for header and section. So I'm just going to return blank for now, so it doesn't yell at us. But I know that we're going to have to come back and use that, because what kind of the goal is when I come back here and there's different types of cuisines, I want them to be sorted based off of what type of cuisine they are. It'll look really sharp. Okay, cool. So based off of what you guys had done today in today's project, how should I go about getting the items stored in the core data stack and putting them into my table view?
Using the fetch result controller?
Yeah, that'll be our first thing that we do. I'm going to make another mark, and I'm going to say properties. And just like Austin said, I'm going to make that, well, it's going to be lazy, because it won't actually need to be initialized until we have it. So it's going to be lazy var, and then I'm going to call it fetched results controller.
So do we not need to declare the controller above, like let controller equal controller optional?
Oh yeah, to get the controller? Yeah, let's do it. Well, we did that before, right? We did that here in our add recipe, but we're going to initialize the first and only recipe controller that we need. Like this.
Because like you told me once, if I say var here, let twice, and that's declaring two different instances of that controller.
Exactly. So this one's going to be our one and only. And then we are going to pass it here via prepare for Segue. So we only need the one let. We should only have the one let. All right, cool. Let's go ahead and flesh out this fetch results controller. And this is going to be a lot of boilerplate code too for you guys. So pay close attention to how we do this, because this is kind of the good, clean way to go about doing it. So do you guys remember what type this fetch results controller needs to be of?
NSFetch request or result?
Yep, exactly what I called it actually. Can anyone tell me why it's not populating?
Import core data?
Yep. We're in import core data, and then it should come in here and say NSFetched result, the right one, result controller. So that's the reason why I named it this. You guys could name this controller whatever you want, but I just like the practice that we followed on line 15, I kind of just give them the same, I don't know, nomenclature that are named in the system. Okay, and then this is going to use a generic type. We haven't really talked about generics yet, but basically what you're going to do here is you're going to pass in the name of the model that you're interested in. So it's going to be our recipe. Okay. And then this is going to be equal to a big chunk of code. And at the end of this big chunk of code, we're going to initialize it. So that's all this is. So we're saying it's equal to this stuff that we're about to do next. Okay. Does anyone know the next step?
Make the fetch request?
Yeah. And I'm going to do it kind of in a roundabout way. So what we're going to do first is I'm going to say let FRC, which is going to stand for fetch NSFetched results controller. So I'm going to say NSFetched results controller, open parentheses, and it's going to have all these aspects that I need. So now I can kind of backtrack and say, okay, first I need a fetch request. So I'm going to say let fetch request equal what? Do you guys know how to go about doing this fetch request?
Should you do this? Is this where the sort descriptors come in?
That'll be the next thing we do if we want sort descriptors. But there's actually a certain type of fetch request that we can pass in. It's going to be called NSFetchRequest.
And then we pass in the recipe like we did above, correct?
Yep, it's going to be a generic type. So we have to just kind of declare a type within a type is kind of what the vibe is for a generic. So we've got that. And we're going to set it equal to recipes fetch request property. So if we hover over, pretty sure if we hover over this, yeah. So these recipes are all the same thing. It's just that we've given it the generic type of NSFetchedResultController so that it gets access to this fetch request property. And this fetch request property, whoops. I don't know why that's not working for us. Oh, I know why. This is the type that we need to give it. I gave double equal signs, which is not supposed to happen. So it says let fetch request be of type NSFetchRequestRecipe. And because we've given it this NSFetchResultController type, we can perform a fetch request. And if you look, well, I guess we could go into it a little bit, but a fetch request is just going to dig into our core data and figure out which things conform to this recipe model. So then I can say, okay, I've got my fetch request taken care of. Now we need a managed object context, which is what?
The core data stack?
Yeah, you guys have done this a bunch. So it's just core data stack dot shared dot main context. Okay. And then if we wanted to make sections, we kind of have to do a what's called a sort descriptor to divvy out the results that we're getting back. So before I get into this section name key path, I'm going to come back into our fetch request. And there's a property within each fetch request that says, we can go through a lot of these, but there's a sort one. It says the sort descriptors of the fetch request, which is just saying like, if we get them back in a certain order, what should the order be? And then we're going to put it inside of a bracket. And it's going to be of type NSSort descriptors. And then there's parameters that we can pass into it. A couple of different ones. I think as far as what you guys are going to be using a lot going forward is we're just going to have a key and then ascending. So ascending will generally refer to like alphabetical order if it's a string, or if it's an int, it will be numerical order, like 0 to 100. So I'm going to say true for ascending because we want them sorted alphabetically because they're going to be a string. And then what do you guys think? We kind of talked about this already, but as far as what should be sorted here in the table view, how do we want each section to be divided up?
Based on the picker food styles, like Mexican, Japanese, all that.
Exactly, and we called that cuisine in our model. To go back to the model object, what it's going to do is it's going to look for recipes that conform to this model that we've set up, and then I can sort by any number of these things, but cuisine makes the most sense. We really could sort by title and make it alphabetical if we wanted to, but I think cuisine probably does the best job. Okay, so then, kind of like Spencer said today, our sort descriptor key needs to match the section name key path. So these two things are just the exact same.
So those will be your sections eventually, is that right?
Yes. Yep. Okay. So what it's going to do is it's going to take all the different types of cuisine sections that it finds and then order the sections based on those things.
Got it.
So we'll see that happen in a bit. We haven't talked about caches yet. You guys will do them in 2 weeks, I think. For now, we'll just put nil. We don't need to cache anything. It's fine. Cool. All right. Now, there are a couple of things that we need to do.
The delegate?
This is all like, yeah, this is all like newish stuff for you guys. So you're right, the delegate part. But the delegate part isn't exactly going to work quite yet. We're saying, hey, this fetch results controller that we made needs to be able to communicate with this recipes table view controller class. But do you guys know why?
Oh, we have to do the do, try, catch?
We do have to do the do, try, catch, but regardless of that, this line of code is still not going to work. Can anyone tell me why? kind of the same situation as our delegate with the picker.
You need to make an extension?
Yeah,
Oh,
so
yeah. You need the NSFetched.
yeah, this class doesn't conform to that type that we talked about today of NSFetchedResultController delegate. So yeah, there's two ways to go about it. You could make it here. I would say for organizational sake, I would make it as an extension in the bottom of the code file.
So Mitch, is this one of the code snippets that Spencer advised us about as well?
Yep, this is it. This is the one. So we're going to make an extension on our recipes table view controller. And then like William said, it's going to be NSFetchedResultController delegate. And then here is where we are basically those code snippets. And really, I wish they would just do this under the hood because it's just kind of a pain to put them all in. But like this is where that big chunk of code comes into play with controller will change content, controller did change content, and then the two separate controller methods. I'm going to go ahead and post this in the after hours channel so that you guys can just pull it and use it because it would be a pain to go in and write this all out. And I don't really want to do that.
What would you call this snippet? Like
this is our, and I think I called it, let me see what I called it here. Core data table view fetch methods is what I called it 3 months ago. If I went back and changed it, I would call it, and that's funny, that's the first code snippet I ever made. I would go back now and call it NSFetchedResultController delegate methods, which sounds like a mouthful, but it's very descriptive of what it is. But whatever will help you guys to refer back to it. And like the nice thing is once we have this project done and finalized, you'll know that you'll have a working version of it to go back and use. But it should just have these 4 methods of will change, did change, and then the controller did change object, and then did change the section info. So this is just kind of telling the view controller that, hey, I've got all this information from the core data stack, and now I'll be in charge of organizing it for you. You just have to display it, but me as the NSFetchedResultController delegate, I will just kind of divvy out that information where it needs to go. So that's why we set the delegate to self here. Okay, cool. So that's a good chunk of code that we got out of the way that we don't really need to worry about going forward here. Now, Austin, you were saying that this is still kind of incomplete. There's another thing we need to add in here.
Yeah, the do, try, catch for the perform fetch.
Yep. If you guys see, there's code snippets for all of these things. There's actually a do, try, catch code snippet somewhere. Try, C++, Swift. So it's called a Swift do catch statement. So if you ever need that, there it is. Like that'll just show you like how it's supposed to be.
So most of the core data code be kind of repetitive, like you said?
Yes, super boilerplate. That's why it's good to just get practice remaking projects from scratch because a lot of it is going to have very minor changes. Like every time I've ever used core data methods with these 4 functions, they've been the exact same. They've never changed. Same thing with basically this fetch results controller. Like a lot of the times I'm just changing the model here, and then I'm also changing just how the sections come back. But those are really the only big changes I make. Okay, so what are we going to try to do here?
Perform the fetch, so it should be like FRC, what we named our consonant.perform fetch.
Yep, and then it says throw. That means that we've got to finish out our catch. But basically what this is going to do, because this is of type fetch results controller, is it's going to do the work of looking for all of these things for us. So it's going to use the fetch request that we made up here to look for recipes. And then it's going to look in a certain context, which is our main context. And then it's going to sort them based off of the cuisine that they each have. So in our catch statement, what I'm just going to say is, there's a lot of different catch statements we can do. I think the one that we did today was fatal error. And then we just said, what did we say? Maybe like error performing fetch for FRC. And this is a type error. And that way we just have some sort of error to come back for us. And then we're missing a return. It needs to be of this specific type. So if you guys ever are like struggling to know what return value to give, just option click and hover over some of your properties, because it's likely that one of them will match it directly. So we just need to return our FRC somewhere before the end of dot closure. So I'm just going to return FRC. And then we should be able to build, and we'll be good to go. Cool.
Can you briefly go over lazy vars, like what their distinctive is?
So the beauty of a lazy var is lazy means that it can be the last to be initialized, can kind of be the final thing that gets touched on. So the reason that we make these lazy is when you first make your core data stack, it'll make the container, and it'll get it all set up and good to go. But we don't want to perform a fetch before this container is made, because it will cause the app to crash. So, and the same thing with the lazy var on the container, kind of, it depends on what's triggered first. But the nice thing is here is that we are configuring our core data stack before we're configuring this fetch results controller. So basically what we're saying is the compiler can do things out of order sometimes. So when we give it the lazy var, we can say, hey, do these things last. Do these, make sure these are like the lowest priority in your order. So like we can initialize everything else, and then that way, and I don't count me on this. I bet if you did just var fetch results controller, it might be fine. But it's just good to have a container before you go digging into it to try and find stuff inside. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So it kind of delays this variable until the very end, or
Exactly.
tries to kind of stagger it a bit.
Exactly. So we're just putting it off until it absolutely needs to be done. Because if this goes making a fetch request and it finds out that there's no container inside this context, it's going to be like, well, there's nothing to look for, so I'm just going to shut down all the way. So that's kind of why we do that. So like I said, guys, this from like 16 to 27, this is going to be some pretty boilerplate code this week. And we're going to tweak it maybe a little bit more tomorrow, especially doing some networking requests. But generally, like, this is a good referral point whenever you come back to make core data objects. All right, let's go tackle our data source methods. So we did this today for the first time. So this will be just some good practice for you guys. Do you remember how to return number of sections?
Fetch results controller dot sections optional, and then count. And the first time I've seen them do this is doing the double question mark 0, so or 0.
Yep. So that's neo coalescing. So that just means like, hey, either do this, and if that doesn't work, do this. So if we don't get any back, just return 0. It's the equivalent of using an if else and saying like, if fetch results controller.sections.count does not equal 0, return count, else return 0. This is just a shorthand way of doing it. Cool. How do we return the number of rows in section?
Fetch results controller dot sections open brackets section dot number of objects, and the same thing, or 0.
And if this is like, if you guys see this and you're like, how does Austin know this? He's probably a whiz, but he's also probably referring to today's projects. So like I said, just refer back to those projects. They'll help you guys out. Unless, Austin, you remember those from memory, then I'm very proud of you.
It's definitely a mixture of both. Definitely not a whiz.
Oh, man. Okay, cool. So this means that this is going to be however many sections we have. It's going to look for how many cuisine sections, and it's going to make them, or it's just going to return 0. So if we don't have any cuisine results back, it's going to be 0. We have just one result of recipe pulled back, and it's of cuisine type Japanese, then our only one is going to be Japanese. Same thing here. This is going to return however many exist within that section. So if we have 2 Thai food and 1 American food, this is knows to say, hey, make 2 rows for Thai food, make 1 row for American food, or if we don't have any of those, don't make any at all. All right, how about title for header in section? Do you guys remember how we did this? This one kind of required a little bit of preemptive property listing.
Well, you can just do the guardlet section info.
Guardlet section info, and you can call that whatever you want to. Section info is a good way to list it. And that's going to be our fetched results controller. And then that's going to look into our sections again. You'll see that we're going to rely on this sections section all the time. And then we're going to ask for, actually, that'll probably be good. And we'll just say else return nil, just so that we make sure that we're returning a value. And then, because this section info, we can check the type of it. It's not really descriptive of what it is, but pretty much it will match whatever type is up here in this section name key path, which is generally a string. So we know that this is going to be a string. So that we can just return section info dot, and then it has a couple of properties. So like if it was numbers, we could return the numbers. If it was name, we could return the name. We'll use the name. Okay, cool. All right, last couple things to finish this up and we'll be good to go. Let's go ahead and configure the cell. And think of this a lot like the table views that we've done up until now, but how do I go about populating the cell with the information I want?
Call your task controller first.
Well, not task controller because that's a different project, right? But we need to give it an actual object.
Your recipe controller? Sorry.
No, you're good. So we'll use the recipe. And this is a lot just like saying, go into your controller, get the array at the controller, and then use index path.row. But this one's just easier for us. We just use object, and then there's an index path up here that will find it for us. So there's a lot of like magic code going under the hood, and you guys will come to really appreciate this fetch results controller because it's super cool. So I'm just going to do cell.textLabel.text is equal to recipe.title. That way, the fetch results for controller is going to have a big list of items. It'll find the specific item that's supposed to live at each row, just like indexPath.row does. And then we can go ahead and funnel that recipe's title into the text label that's at each cell. Okay, let's go ahead and take care of the delete method too. So one cool thing about fetch results controller is that we don't actually need this delete rows animation. It'll do it for us.
What happens if we keep that? Will we get like a visible error?
We can try it. We'll come back and try it and see what it does. I can't remember if it makes it crash or not, or if it just doesn't do anything at all. Anyways, so this is kind of what we're going to do is we're going to do the same type of thing. We'll say let recipe equal fetch results controller dot object at, and then we can pass in the same index path that we're deleting from. And then we've got that method that's really nice. It's our recipe controllers delete method that we made. Looks like you guys were doing this backwards where you hadn't made the delete recipe method. This would be a good time to go back in and create a delete method inside that just basically did this. But that's going to find our specific recipe, match it up to whatever lives in the main context, and delete it for us there. And then the beauty of and the reason why I don't think we need this, Austin, is because the beauty of the fetch results controller is it's doing all of these delegate methods to display the information for us so that if it deletes rows, it'll do the animation here.
Right. I think my only concern or question was that he kind of made it a point to make sure to delete that. So I was wondering if it does some sort of like fatal error crash or something like that.
Oh shoot.
But if you keep it, just does the same thing.
We'll experiment and see what it does.
All right.
Cool. We'll leave it there and then we'll come back to it. But that should delete it for us. Cool, guys. We are almost done. Let's go ahead and do our prepare for segue, just like we always do. So if segue.identifier is equal to add recipe, I'm just eyeballing that because I'm pretty sure that's what we named it. I'm going to say add recipe BC. Oops, so I need to declare it. I'm going to say let add recipe BC equal segue.destination. Downcast it as our add recipe view controller, else return. And then now, because we used that property earlier of our recipe controller, I can pass it this first recipe controller that we made down here. So now the one that lives on this file can transfer to our add recipe view controller file. And you guys will see here in a second, the main reason that we need that is we need to use our save button method here. And that's just a way that we can go about doing it. So this should be all queued up and squared away for us. The real results will come when we start to save things. So let's come to our add recipe view controller and let's go about configuring this save button pressed. So first off, how do I make sure that the user has put in information in the text field, picker view, and text view?
Do you guard let or just let?
Yeah, let's guard let. So we'll do guard let title equal what?
The title of our recipe, so title text field dot text.
Yep. And then if I wanted to make sure that it's not empty, there's not a blank text field, how would I do that?
You add the bang to the beginning of it.
Yep. And then what I can do is access the isEmpty property. And that will just make sure, hey, make sure title is not empty.
Don't we have to do a let before that as well, or no?
Nope, that's just a Boolean property. So we don't need to give it a property to live in. This is just a descriptor of the title itself. It's just a bool. So we don't have to give that a property. We need this to have a property because we're going to pass it into our save function. Okay, let's do the picker. The real struggle with the picker is that you guys will kind of see in a second, but this is another method that we have to implement with your picker, and it's kind of a funky one. But if come down to your extension, and it's going to be func picker view did actually, I think it's called did select. Yes, did select row. So the real issue here with this so far is we've gotten it to display with our data, but our delegate's not actually going to check what's living inside of what's selected unless we implement this method here. But all we're going to return is the same thing, just pickerdata.row. That's what it's going to return for us. But the real problem is like this isn't going to return it to anything that we want. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to give it a variable to live in. I'm going to call it picker selection. It's going to be a string optional value. So this won't exist until the user has actually selected one. And now instead of returning it, I'm just going to set our picker selection equal to whatever they selected in the data in the picker. I keep wanting to say date picker. It's just a picker. Okay, and if that was all just like right over your head, that's fine, because these are just kind of the things you have to get used to with using different delegate methods that just come with certain things that you need to know about. That's why documentation is really good and cool blogs that people have written. So now what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to say cuisine is equal to picker selection. Oops, I guess I should make it a property. Let cuisine equal picker selection. So that'll make sure that the user actually selected one of those things from the picker. We can't really use like a text attribute of a picker. So this is the way, kind of the roundabout way we'll make sure we do that. And then let's let our directions equal our directions text view dot text. And then we want to make sure that that one's not empty as well. So we'll do directions dot is empty. I don't know why that's is empty. This is yelling at us and it's mad. Is empty, and that's fine as is. Else return. So if you can see, we're just kind of queuing up our save method to work here. We're just making sure we have a title and it's not empty. We're making sure we have some value from the picker, and then we're making sure we have the directions from the text view. So if we've got all of those, now what can we do to actually save it?
Core data.share.save or core data.save. I'm not sure which order it is.
Well, the cool thing is we actually already made a method that's going to do that, and it's going to create a recipe and then worry about the rest of that junk. But inside our recipe controller, we've got this create recipe method. So we're just going to use that. So we're just going to say create recipe. Oops, we need to use our recipe controller, right? We're going to do recipe controller dot create recipe. And then we're just going to pass in all those things that we checked for. So we've got a title, we've got a cuisine, and we've got directions. So I'm going to quickly build that. And then do you guys remember what to do here when it says the call will never be used?
Update?
No,
no, never mind. Wrong again.
We're going to do that discardable result here. That just means like, hey, if it's not actually called, we don't care. The thing is, it's actually going to be called. I wish Xcode was intuitive enough to know that, but it's not. Cool. Okay. Now we can hit save. I'm 100% confident that everything in here will save, but it's not going to show up in our table view. Can anyone tell me why? Maybe I'll show you our table view so you can get a look at possibly why. Why is this not going to show up in our table view after we save?
Do we need to do the cell?
We already configured the cell. We're good. You're on the right track, though. Why is the
table view reload data?
Yep. Who said that?
Me, Taylor.
Oh, Taylor. Okay. Nice job, Taylor. So what we're going to do is we're going to come into our, I'm not going to do it in the view did load. I'm going to do it in view will appear. Because view did load runs once, view will appear will run every time the view is changed or different. Whoa. So I'm going to say view will appear. Stop. That's not what I wanted. View will, oh my gosh, I'm struggling. View will appear. We'll call super.view will appear. It's going to be animated. And then I'll just call table view dot reload data. All right, guys, let's give this a run. If all goes well, we should be able to write a title, pick a food type, give it some cooking instructions, and then we'll be good to go. And finish right on the hour. And the reason this works is because I already have some core data stuff loaded into this. So if you guys already have made, a, like a, what do I want to say? If you've already made this specific app and then you come back to it, it's going to have all those persisted all the persisted data. So what you can actually do is just delete it from your simulator, which is being kind of a pain right now. So anyways, Austin, you wanted to see what was going to happen if I kept that delete method inside. It caused it to crash. So what it said is invalid number of rows after section 0. It's like it's trying to delete a section that doesn't exist. Or I'm sorry, it's trying to delete a row that doesn't exist. That's why that doesn't work.
It seems like something you can get caught up on easily and be stuck on trying to figure it out for a while, unless you truly know like what that's doing wrong.
Right. That's the nice thing about these delegate methods that we've made down here is that they take care of that for you. So I've already got some stuff in here that we need to delete.
Are we supposed to hide the views on the cook time and ingredients, or no, those are just set for?
I set those because they would be good.
All right.
So let's do pizza. It's gonna be Italian, and I just left those in there because I don't want to have to deal with it. So I'm gonna save. So that's nice. That made us an Italian section. Let's make sure it puts more stuff in this section. I'm gonna do pasta. Nice. Someone give me a Mexican food. Something I can spell.
Bean
Burrito.
I'll say bean burrito. Okay, cool, bean burrito. Someone give me Greek food.
Like
Gyro.
yeah.
And there we go. So, I mean, it's hard to test these core data apps because you kind of have to get to an endpoint before you can see your stuff pull up. You need like a save method or something to kind of lock it into our core data stack. But as far as everything that we did here, give me a 1 to 3 in the chat. If I told you to make a core data list, like a book list, like where you went in and saved books and you did it patterned after this, 1 would be, I couldn't do it at all. 2 would be like, I could do 70%, and 3 would be like, I could do it right now. Rad. Okay. Before we close it out, what questions do you guys have about what we've done so far?
I think I wasn't paying attention when you did the sections inside the override function. I forgot which one it was.
Okay, down here.
Yeah, the fetch controller. That actually created the sections that we just saw, like the Greek, Mexican, or.
Well, so if we hover over sections, it's saying NSFetchResults section info, and it's getting it from our section key path. So we used our sort descriptor to outline like which actual like property, which attribute in our model to look for, and then it needed a key path just to like look for. Everything needs like key paths need a value it needs a key to look for a value. So cuisine is just our key to look for. And so all of those sections were responsive to this cuisine. If I put in name, each section would be based off of name. And we can totally do that. I can totally go in and do it based off the title. It might look a little funky here, but we can do it.
Yeah, for some reason my save button isn't clicking. I may have something named differently than you have. I'm not sure what's causing that error. It won't even pop back to my view controller, which means it's when it runs. I assume it means it runs across the create recipe. That's where the error is happening.
Okay. We'll tackle it here in a second. So what's happening here is we gave it an attribute to look for in our model. We gave it a key for when it actually like needs to match that up, which cuisine is just these two need to match each other. And then what it's doing here is it's saying, okay, whatever section you gave me, it could have X amount of objects. In our case, it would be, these are all of our different sections here. These are all the different varieties of things that it could be for cuisine. And then we just said, for the number of sections, give us however many those are. for the number of objects that live in it, look for however many objects are of the Thai cuisine and the American cuisine. Does that kind of make sense, Will?
Yeah. I'm trying to kind of figure out how does it know like which cuisine it belongs to? Like, does it just what part helps with that?
So all the models have this property inside, right? And every model is going to have one of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 options. One of those 7 options. So it's smart enough when we give it a key path, it'll look for each value, and then it'll just map out and say, like, how many Mexican items do I have? Oh, I have 3. Cool, let's put all 3 of those in a section.
Okay, I think I got it. Yeah.
Kind of tricky to conceptualize, especially because it's kind of a new thing.
Sure. Yeah.
Austin, I will get to yours in just a second. Out of everyone else here, do you guys feel pretty good about this? Is there anything you want to see again, or do you have any questions about?
I think it finally came full circle. I feel like it could do pretty good if I went on my own and just like made my own project.
Cool. Okay, awesome. If you guys feel like tonight's project helped, will you give me a yes in the chat? Like a yes in the participants list? And if it didn't, you can DM me and tell me why. Okay, rad. All right. That wasn't a test. You guys can, if you didn't feel good about it, it's fine. Okay, sweet. Okay, so this is recorded. I'm gonna post it for you guys, and then you can come back and refer to it if you need to. I'm gonna hit stop recording just so Austin and I can kind of debug his. Does anyone else have anything else before I close it out? Okay, you guys are awesome. Thanks for being here tonight. You're gonna do great this week, and I will see you tomorrow morning.
Thanks.
Thanks, guys.